We left off last week. I went through this real quickly, verse 14, and we're going to just backtrack just a little bit. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. There's a reason for that. Evil communications corrupts good morals. It's a standard rule. No matter how righteous we believe we are, we can be affected by other people, even though we think we can't. The truth of the matter is, people do rub off on us. Some of the following teaching that went with this was as follows: what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? What communion has light with darkness? These are all rhetorical questions. The answer to each one is no, none. What accord has Christ with Belial, or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? None at all. For you are the temple of the living God. This is what prompted Paul to make this statement. Sometimes it's used out of context. Oh my, so much. Most any time you hear a preacher or a teacher refer to this, it's always taken out of context. Remember what the context is. There is no accord between night and day. And then he refers to the church or the individual as being the temple of God. In context, he's doing that to make his point that there is no association between the righteous and the unrighteous when it comes to spiritual concerns. If you ever want to argue with somebody over the meaning of it, don't forget the context, what the apostle's talking about. God has said, I will dwell in them, walk among them, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. God's people have always been the temple of the living God. That's never changed. Adam was the temple of the living God. It's never changed. It's always been that way. It's always going to be that way to the end of time. It's not like something new happened. It's common sense. If God is in us, then we have to be the temple of God. God dwells in his temple. So any persons that God has dwelt in, those persons automatically became the temple of God. That's all there is to that. But sometimes it's twisted, and a lot of rules have been made, even in the church, that are not applicable. It's not what the apostle was talking about in the context. And whenever you take a passage out of its context, it becomes a pretext, because you can make it say anything you want to say, and it's been done time and time again. Even in the church, it's been done. Shouldn't be that way. Should never do that. That's really bad. And if anybody were arguing with you or debating with you, if they were on their toes, they could demonstrate that you were out of bounds, and your credibility would be shot. Really, somebody would ask, how are you going to live in such a world? It's not new. It wasn't new with God and with Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:17, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. You become something other than what you were. The old things, what you used to be, those things are gone. I don't live in the streets of Detroit anymore. I'm a different guy. All things have become new. John 3:3, unless one is born again. Starting over. That's the point, isn't it? That you're starting over? As though you were being born? You were born and you took on a whole new existence. Of course, you didn't have an existence before that, but once you were born, you took on a new existence. Isn't that what being born again means? You take on a new existence. Forget about baptism. What is the meaning of it? Born again. Unless one is born again, takes on this new existence, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Colossians 1:13, God has delivered us from the power of darkness. He has conveyed us, translated us, transported us into the kingdom of the Son of his love. Christians were said to have turned the people from darkness to light, from the power of Satan to God. It's a 180-degree about face is what's taking place. If that's true, then what agreement is there between you and the unbeliever? What agreement is there? Sometimes you get into these arguments with people want a fellowship, denominational people, spiritual fellowship. You can't do that. Not according to what we're being taught here. Any false entity boy, I hate to say this in public. Any false entity is the product of Satan. What fellowship is there between the two groups? There's been a lot of times in preacher circles, they call it sharing your pulpit. There's been a lot of times I've had preachers asked to share with the pulpit here. And what they mean by that is they come and preach to you, and I go to their church and preach to them. Sharing the pulpit. Can I do that? Is that permissible for me to do that? Could I allow a Baptist preacher to come and stand here in the temple of God and speak to you? Of course I can't. What do you have in common with the darkness that he speaks of? And I'm not trying to be ugly. I got a lot of friends that are denominational preachers. But there's one thing, and you cannot get around it. When you teach salvation by faith alone, you are contradicting the Lord Jesus Christ. There's no two ways around that. He didn't advocate salvation by faith only. He never taught it. Whenever others did teach it, he confronted them because they did. And he called them out because of the hypocrisy. And according to everything that the New Testament teaches, there cannot be fellowship between light and darkness. Now, when I say darkness, I'm saying a teaching of salvation by faith only. That's darkness. Well, what's the light? Salvation by grace through faith. That's the light. And there can't be any compatibility between the two. But we live in a different world. It's really a different world. Down in Nashville, the churches, a lot of the churches, they do share pulpits with denominational preachers. And people think it's the greatest thing ever. The question is, what does the Lord think? And he's not fond of that at all. There's got to be a distinction drawn between the unbeliever and the believer. Now, we're talking about spiritual matters, right? We're not talking about playing golf together. We're not talking about going in business and opening up a grocery store together. We're not talking about anything that pertains to the things of this world. We're talking about spiritual things. Well, you mean you can do anything that pertains to the things of this world as long as it's not going to hurt you spiritually? Now, if it's going to take a toll on you spiritually, then you don't want to get involved with it. But anywhere you look in the scriptures, when we're talking about the distinction between darkness and light, it's the spiritual that's under consideration. We live in the same world. We got to coexist in this world. Do we approve? No, we don't approve of things. Spiritual things. But do I like the way this guy can take care of our books in our local grocery store? Absolutely. The guy's a brilliant man. I can't think of anybody I'd rather have take care of my books than my Baptist preacher friend. But we're still not going to share pulpits. There's a difference between the spiritual and the temporal. And we have to draw that line. Sometimes the line ain't drawn, and we start making up our own laws. Now, in the church, it's always been bad that this has happened. There's always been rules imposed on people that should never have been imposed. It was a shame. It was an embarrassment. And if anybody had been on their toes, they could have called us out on it and proven their point. Been a lot of silly things taught in the church. Young people, you don't know it. You've never heard this stuff. How about the length of a man's hair? Hey, that was true. You could only have your hair a certain length. And if it was any longer than that, you weren't fit to wait on the table. A certain length. And it wasn't as long as mine. Mine gets a whole lot longer, actually. Especially in the winter. I hair over in the winter. Keeps my head warm. I let my head and my face both grow out. I'm like a woolly booger. But it keeps my head warm. And somebody's going to tell me I'm sinning because I want to keep my head warm? It's been done for a whole lot less than that. There's been so many people run off through the years. That's why people hate us. It's not because we teach baptism is by immersion. It's not because we teach baptism is for the remission of sins. Nobody can argue against that. It's all the foo-foo that went along with it. That's why people don't like us. We don't want to be guilty of that if we can avoid it. We will sometimes simply because we don't know everything. And sometimes in our ignorance, we'll say or do things that we really shouldn't have done. But we don't know any better. There's a difference. There's a difference in what Paul's talking about between the spiritual and the carnal. Or I should say the spiritual and the temporal. Otherwise, you'd have to leave the world if that were the case. We're all in business with the politicians in Washington, aren't we? Don't they all work for us? We're in league together, whether we want to admit it or not. I don't want to admit it. But we are. We pay their salaries. Oh, anyway. Relationships between believers and unbelievers are at best limited to the temporal and the external. The temporal and external. Those relationships, as long as they don't put my faith to a test that I cannot bear, then that's a whole different matter. Sometimes being around some people can make you cuss. Being around some people is so irritating. And I know I'm not the only person in this room that found such a person. There are some people that'll make you scratch your skin right off of you because they are so irritating. Sometimes it's better to separate from such people. I wouldn't want to be in league with a person that drove me crazy or that would drive me to cuss or drink. They're a test of faith, but we don't have to walk into them with our eyes wide open. Sometimes it's better off to not get around a Christian who will drive you crazy. Some of them too. Well, they're not really Christians. Well, they were baptized. I don't know what they were. I always thought you become a Christian if you were a believer who repented and were baptized. I don't know. No, I do know. Of course he's a Christian. Some Christians can be very irritating. Some believers can be very irritating. Do I want to open up a local grocery store with them? I do not. I do not. It's not because it's a sin. It's because I don't want to be around them all the time. There are some people, and whether you admit it or not, there are some people you don't want to be around all the time. It might be me for all I know. You may tolerate me for 2 hours a day. I can't tell. But all of us have encountered such people. That's not what he's talking about. We have to be sober-minded when we try to understand what the apostle means. On the spiritual level, believers and unbelievers live in two completely different worlds. There's no commonality between me and a Baptist preacher. None. None whatsoever. I told you the other day I was a one-issue voter, and I am. If a person's for abortion, killing babies, if that's what they favor, I won't vote for them. I don't care who they are, Democrat or Republican. I won't vote for them. I'm a one-issue voter. The rest of it don't matter to me. I don't care about the economy. I don't care about the southern border. I don't care about anything else. If a person is in favor of killing babies, I'll never cast a vote for such a person. And the same thing is true in my spiritual walk. If a person believes, teaches people that they're going to be saved by faith alone, then we have nothing in common spiritually. Nothing whatsoever. That one issue drives a stake through my heart, and I can't have anything to do with them. According to what John wrote, I better not have anything to do with them. 2 John verses 9, 10, and 11. There's a difference made between the two worlds. We live in both of them, and we have to learn how to deal with both of them. We live in the physical as well as the spiritual world. It should be obvious that believers cannot live in both worlds. Ain't that what Jesus meant? Isn't that what he was talking about? You cannot serve two masters. Isn't that what he meant? We don't believe it though, do we? We don't believe that. Of course you can. What does it hurt? We don't believe that. No, we don't. At least not with our mouth, but sometimes it's practiced. Jesus meant it though. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and mammon. It's not possible. Well, I do it every day. Well, it's not possible. You may do it, but the Lord doesn't accept it. And there's the difference. I accept the Lord. The real question is, does the Lord accept me? You ever wonder if Jesus likes you? I do that every day. I do that. I wonder if he likes me, especially when I'm ugly. Sometimes you won't find this hard to believe, but sometimes I get ugly. Sometimes I get upset. I get angry. Sometimes politics can drive me crazy if I ain't careful. There are several things that can drive me crazy, and I have to limit myself or I'll get too ugly. We're all susceptible to it. We all have to be very careful. not to let the devil get the best of us. He knows what my weakness is. I wear it on my sleeve every day. Anybody could see that. Well, what's he going to use if he wants to attack me? I think we all know what that's. He's going to hit you in your weakest point, isn't he? That's what I do. You go for the nose and see if you can drive it up in his forehead. That's the way you take out somebody if you're fighting. Always go for the nose, underneath it. Right there. The fight's over if you get a good lick. His eyes will water so bad he can't see you anymore. You always go for the weak point. That's the way you fight. And that's the way Satan fights. He goes for our weak point. You can't serve two masters. You got to keep your eye on the prize always. And it's hard to do. Do not love the world or the things in the world. Is it wrong to love the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee? I love the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. I mean, I really do. Back when we were younger, we used to go up in the mountains about 6 o'clock in the morning. We'd go over to that reservation just across the bridge over there. Cherokee. We go to Cherokee. Chris is a little bitty guy. He liked to go over and play with the chief, Indian chief. But I used to love to go up in there and smell all the smells over there in that little Cherokee town. All them Indians sitting out there in their teepees, and they was cooking up stuff for us to buy. It cost about 4 times more than it should have. And we bought it, and we eat it, and we smiled, and we giggled. I love them mountains. I love them mountains. John said, do not love the world. Did I sin? Was it wrong to love them mountains? That's not what he's talking about, was it? God created the world. What did he say about it? It's good. God created a good world. Well, what is John talking about? Do not love the world's system, the way it operates, the way it functions, what people have turned it into. And that covers a lot of different territory when you stop and think about it. Do not love the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone does love the world and its system, the way it operates, then the love of the Father is not in him. All that is in the world, lust of the flesh, the eyes, and the pride of life, these things are not of the Father, they're of the world. James said, adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Friendship of the world makes me God's enemy? But I'm a Christian. Well, James understood that. He was writing to Christians, wasn't he? Sure was. And what did he say? You are adulteresses. You're cheating on your husband. How did I do that, James? Your friendship with the world makes you the enemy of God. You're on the wrong side of the battle. Whoever, therefore, wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. When Jesus looks at me, what does he see? What does he think about me? Does he like me? Or do I make him sick? Well, I'm a Christian. Laodiceans sins were Christians, weren't they? And what did Jesus say about them? You make me sick. What does Jesus think about me? That's my question. And it has to be all of our question. I know what I think about him. I think I know what I think about him. I know he's the Savior of the world. I think I like him. Maybe I don't like him. Maybe I just say I do because it's not cool to say you don't like Jesus. Why do I do the things I do? What does Jesus think about me when he looks at me? It doesn't matter what I think about Jesus, does it? That's not what's important. In the final analysis, the only thing that really matters is what does Jesus think about me? And I might like myself. I might think I'm a pretty good guy. But the real question is, what does Jesus think about me? He might not think I'm a pretty good guy. And what he thinks is the only thing that matters in the end.
That's always a, you got to watch every day to ask yourself, like feeding your family, for example, how much time do I spend trying to feed my family versus teaching them the right thing about God? What's always affected me is, what do I love the most? I got to feed my family, that's what God said. So I got to pursue that situation. But if I let that overtake my desire to serve God, I'm wrong. And the question is, what point is that? Because I want the best for them, both ways. You see what I'm saying?
Who can answer that question? Yeah, that only you can answer it.
But I'm saying that's for everybody.
Everybody has to fight their own battle of Armageddon. Every one of us does. That's the hard part. That's what makes the Bible such a bitter, bitter book. It's a very sweet book. I study the Bible a lot, have for a long time. And it's a very, very sweet book. But it has given me so much heartburn you wouldn't believe it. It's a very bitter book because it demands that you look at yourself and be honest.
You know what? I don't mean to interrupt your class.
No, go ahead. I like this.
What I've always kind of done is put it out there, pursue what I'm pursuing, and then accept what the answer is. It's like, for example, if I'm trying to do something and I put it out there and it doesn't seem to be working, then I'll change direction. But if I put it out there, what I'm pursuing, and it seems to be going right, then I'm kind of thinking that maybe God wants me to go that way, and that's what I do. That's the only thing that's the only way I know.
I've been walking with this boy right here for 40 years, at least 40 years. I know what he's talking about. I've been through the ups and downs with him enough times. It's hard to be a young man or a young woman, either one. It's hard, very hard. When you're young, you're at the weakest point of your faith for the rest of your life. From say 25 years old. All you're going to do from 25 is become stronger and stronger in faith. So at 25, at that moment, you're at your weakest moment of faith that you're going to have from that time forward. That means you're going to face some of the most severe tests that you'll ever have to face when you're at your weakest point of faith. One of the big things, a man, I don't know much about women. I mean, I'm not a woman. I just know what I'm told, but I do know a little bit about men. One of the biggest things a man faces is the responsibility of taking care of his family. Everybody wants, well, I shouldn't say that. Godly men want to make sure they take care of their families. Probably the first thing that comes to the mind of a 25-year-old man is that means money. You got to have money. That was always what I thought about a lot. So what do you do as a young man? Well, I worked overtime. I worked all the overtime I could get because that meant money. I started getting closer to getting paid what I was actually worth. I got time and a half, but Sundays were better because that was double time, so getting a little closer. 10 times was actually what I was worth, but I was taking what I could get. Anyway, I wanted the bigger money. And I worked all the overtime I could work. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means, well, I'm not at home as much, right? I'm not at home as much as I used to be. Well, what does that mean? That means my kids aren't around me as much as they used to be. My BR, she was probably happy she didn't have to be around me as much. But my kids, they might have been happy too, I don't know. My kids weren't around my influence as much. They weren't around my strong hand as much. Mamas, they got the ability to snuggle up and cuddle with the kid. Daddy's got the ability to have a strong hand. Children revere their daddies because they're kind of afraid of them if they get upset. So they try not to upset the guy. And then they're teaching. When I'm off making money so we could go to Disney World, I wasn't teaching my children about God. How could I? I can't be in two places at one time. So I had to make a decision. Which one was it going to be? And the problem is I'm having to make a decision at what might be the weakest point of my spiritual life, my faith. So I'm taking what little faith I have, and I'm trying to make one of the most important decisions in my life. As far as my children are concerned, what am I going to do? We can get by on what I made in 40 hours. We can live on that. Now, if you're going to get fired if you don't work, that's another ball game. I'm talking about volunteering. What am I going to do? Am I going to make the money, or am I going to spend time with my children? I made the wrong decision for a little while, but I learned a little bit back in John Gibson days. He helped me out a whole lot. And I learned to prioritize what was truly important versus what you want to do. Didn't have to. I wanted to do extra money so we could go play and stuff. So Brother Gibson, he helped me learn, and I quit worrying so much about money. I still worried about money a lot, too much. But when it came to spending time with my family, I invested more. I had to work 10 hours a day. That was my regular work day. I would get home and I would spend my time with BR and the kids until they went to bed, and that was at 8 o'clock. When they went to bed, I'd go to my study room and I would study from 8 o'clock, usually to about 11 or 12 o'clock. And then I'd go to sleep, and I'd get up around 2 o'clock in the morning, and I would study again until 5 o'clock, and then I had to go to work. And that was the day after day after day after day. I had to squeeze everything together in order to make sure I spent time with my children. I did that because I started believing what was really important. I don't know how strong I believed that, but Brother Gibson told me that. And if he said it, I knew it had to be right. So I started living that way. My faith was still not much, but my faith in Brother Gibson was quite a bit more. I could see him. I couldn't see God. I was really, really weak faith, 25 years old. And in time, I got to where I could really believe it was true, that where you spent your time was much more important than extra dollars. And I was happy I'd done it that way. God bless Brother Gibson, not me. And it's very hard. It's very hard for a young man to make the right decision. Whatever he does, he wants to do good. He really does want to do good. He just doesn't really know how to go about it. That's one of the reasons why it's important for us to talk to each other. That's why it was important for me to talk to Brother Gibson. I learned something from that old man. He was 74 years old, and he taught me something. No, he was 71 at that time. He died a few years later. Anyway, younger people need to pick out older people. Usually it's the parents who you can trust their advice in trying to make decisions. Pride's got to go. Pride's got to go. We can't be so proud that we won't talk to each other. We need to put away our pride, and when we've got a problem, we need to get advice, get counsel from a sage, is what the Bible would say, the words it would use, a sage, somebody you consider wise in such matters. It may not be the parents. They're good, and I love them with all my heart, but they may not be wise in these areas. It may be another person, maybe a school teacher, maybe a Bible class teacher, it might be a preacher, it might be the old sister so-and-so. Doesn't talk much, but when she does, everybody listens. Maybe she one I want to talk to. I don't know. But we need to get counsel from other people. The reason is because they've been there. They've done that. They've got the experience. They made the mistakes. And because they made their mistakes, they can help me keep from making the same mistakes. If I'm not so proud, I won't listen to them. But pride can become a very big problem. I think somebody said it goes before a downfall. I don't know. Adulteresses, did that satisfy you? Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world, he makes himself the enemy of God. The enemy of God. What a frightening thought. Do not be conformed to this world, John. Don't act like the world, John. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Don't act like the world. Act like Jesus. A married unbeliever obeys the gospel. This was the question that Paul was asked in Romans chapter 7. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm getting them confused. Romans, no. 1 Corinthians 7. He discussed something else. Oh, he discussed his own sins. Okay. 1 Corinthians 7. Paul had been speaking about marriage. Who could and who could not get marriage. Now he changes to another group of married folks. But to the rest of you married folks, I am about to tell you this. Not the Lord. The Lord, he didn't teach this during his own ministry. What we have discussed up till now, Jesus taught during his ministry. But now I'm going to teach you something that he didn't cover, but he wants me to cover. Okay, that's what the language means here. It's not what it may appear to be. To the rest of you married folks, I'm saying it because the Lord didn't address it. He didn't have any reason to address it. If any brother has a wife who does not believe, is not a Christian, I guess that's why the Lord didn't address it, right? There wasn't any at that time. If any brother has a wife who does not believe, is not a Christian, and if she is willing to live with him, she don't mind that he's a Christian. She doesn't interfere with his Christian life. She lets him meet with the saints. She lets him do the business of the Lord. She lets him give on the first day of the week money that is partly hers. And if it doesn't bother her, if she's willing to live with him, don't divorce the woman. You stay married. God married you. You're joined together, and God wants you to stay that way with this woman because you can stay with her. without violating your principles. And the same thing holds to a woman. If she has a husband and he doesn't believe, he's not a Christian, if he's willing to live with her, he doesn't put limits on her as to what she can do, let her not divorce him. They're supposed to stay married to each other. There's no reason to divorce. Why? Because the unbeliever didn't interfere with her spiritual life. Now, implied in that, at least it's not wise for the believer to marry the unbeliever. It might even be wrong. That's debatable. And it's been debated since I can remember. And the reason it's at least implied is because what Paul's talking about in the case of the married person who becomes a believer, which is a whole different matter. On the first, marrying one is a matter of choice. On this situation that he's talking about now, he's talking about something that was thrust upon you. It's an entirely different matter. But the conclusion's obvious. It's not good for the believer to be married to the unbeliever. It's not good. I worked with a man one time. He was a member of the church. His wife belonged to one of the denominations. And he said, well, I just disagree with everything you said. He said, I'm married and my marriage just went off perfectly. And he was an older man. He was getting close to 60, I'd say. And I said, no problems at all, huh? About your religion? No problems at all. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Where do your two boys go to church? You know where they went? They didn't go anywhere. Neither one of them. But his marriage was perfect. I think he needed to go back and reread the book. I believe he missed something. If you're not going to be honest with yourself, there's no sense in reading the Bible because it does require honesty. And if I don't stop talking, they're going to start making announcements of me sitting right here. So I believe I'll quit. God willing, next week we'll start on chapter 7. If I keep Michael quiet. I love that somebody talked to me, Michael.